It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the grading sports agent, NIL agent, Matt Lupi. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to become a sports agent and work in college athletics?
Yeah, so I didn't always know that I wanted to be a sports agent. I just wanted to get in sports some way or another. I actually took a trip to London with my school, Temple University, and we did like a sport business immersion trip. Got to tour a bunch of different facilities, and we went to Octagon Sports, which is a worldwide sports agency. And just hearing their presentation, I was like, "This is it! Like, this is what I want to do." And got involved shortly after.
Of course, what was that like first getting started in sports and working as an umpire?
Yeah, so working as an umpire was kind of just like a passion, kind of fun thing for me. I played Little League Baseball, like most people, and just stayed in the community. I started umpiring Little League Baseball. I would do it like every day after school, go umpire a game, got some cash, and it was fun. I just learned more about the game, got to interact with some different people and see what it was like, not just as a player, but from a different perspective.
Of course, going to Temple, what was that experience like becoming the lacrosse student manager?
So this was right when I got to Temple. I had a bunch of hours that I needed to accomplish through my program, like volunteer hours, just to check a box and make sure you graduate. So I just kind of applied for anything and everything. Came across the Temple University lacrosse team, started helping them out with like some tournaments, and then they brought me on as a student manager in the spring season. So basically, what that entailed was show up to practices and games, help run the clock, do any announcements, help keep stats for the team. So it was fun. That was my first time really involved in a team, not as a player, but as an employee. So it was cool just to see the process behind the scenes.
While at Temple, what were some of your studies that you did?
Yeah, so I got a degree in sport management, and I also got a minor in entrepreneurship. So sport management was really your classes about finance, econ, legal stuff, all the business side of sports. And then my entrepreneurship was basically just me wanting more experience about what it meant to run a business. So got a lot of projects on, start a business, business plans, all of that stuff.
After becoming the student manager, what was that experience like getting to work in marketing and communications for the Italian volleyball club?
Yeah, so this was a remote internship. Obviously, it was a position in Italy, so I just did it all over Zoom and stuff like that. But it was a fun experience. This was during COVID, so I had opportunities lined up to work with different organizations, but because of sports kind of being put on hold, the fall of 2020, those were kind of taken away from me. So I had to look elsewhere. This was just kind of like helping them with their website, emails, stuff like that. Not really something I wanted to get involved with, but it was cool to see what sports looked like in a different country and make connections in that part of the industry.
Of course, after graduating from Temple, what was that experience like becoming a management for a company?
Yeah, so brand management, I did that throughout college. There was a professional organization run by students at Temple called Saga, the Sport and Governance Association. And we would provide opportunities for students with meetings, guest speakers, conferences, really just to give you an in depth look at the sport business industry, put you in contact with the correct people, and really just show you what it's all about. So I got involved, and with brand management, I was in charge of the social media aspect of it. At the time, I was running a podcast and a Twitter page, so they really liked my experience with that. So helped promote events. I helped reach out to guest speakers, and then slowly got more involved into planning our events and conferences.
Of course, what were some of your roles as the director of operations for the lacrosse program?
Yeah, so this was a promotion that I got within the organization. I worked with the Temple lacrosse team for 3 years. It was a great experience. My last season with them, got the promotion to director of ops. This is basically your behind the scenes planning, because a lot of people don't really realize this, but whenever pro sports teams or college sports teams play, they have to travel, they have to have buses, planes, hotels, meals. And there's someone in charge of all of that. And that was basically my role. So if we had to travel for a game, I would help coordinate how we're going to get there. What's the itinerary look like? What are the meals that we're going to get? What allergies do people have? All those things. And then still, it was a day-to-day role as far as helping with practices and games as well.
Of course, what was that transition like from working on the collegiate level to then going professionally and working with the Philadelphia Eagles as the game day staff?
Yeah, it was pretty seamless because I had a lot of experience in the sport industry, knew about it well. I had connections and knew how to kind of get how to interact with athletes. I think a lot of people get starstruck when they see athletes and they don't know how to act, but it's just, they're people too. And we're all there to accomplish a common goal. So got involved with the Eagles doing like ticket scanning and ushering. So it was more just game day staff. You show up on game day when the Eagles had home games, you help people into the stadium, help them find their seats, make sure everyone's safe and happy, having a good time as long as the Eagles are winning, right? So it was cool. This was a season that they made the playoffs. So I had a lot of fun, got to see Tom Brady come into town and play the Eagles. So it was definitely a cool environment.
What was that process like for you to become a sports agent and getting to represent the people in NIL?
Yeah. So for NIL, well, the ultimate goal for me is to become an NFL agent. And for that, you need a graduate degree, either law school or master's degree. So in the fall, I'm going to start my master's program to get started on that. But NIL, you don't really need any education background. Basically, you just need to get registered in the state that you want to work in. So for me, I'm from Pennsylvania. I currently live in Texas, but most of my connections were in Pennsylvania. So I got registered in the state of Pennsylvania, meaning I can represent any athlete that goes to a college program in Pennsylvania. So filed the paperwork with Pennsylvania. They got back to me, said, "Hey, you're approved." I start reaching out to athletes at Penn State, Pitt, Temple, the big football programs in the state. Got some clients that I recruited, signed them, and currently working with a few as far as their marketing with NIL.
Of course, what is that process like for you to go out there and recruit athletes to represent them in
Yeah,
NIL?
sure. So a lot of it's done over Instagram. That's the biggest tool that I use. If I find a player that is marketable or a great player, find them on Instagram, follow them, send them a message and say, "Hey, my name's Matt. I'm an NIL agent. I'm not sure if you've really been involved in NIL before, but would love to have a conversation with you if you'd be open to it." So they'll get back either saying yes or no, or maybe sometimes they don't respond. But if someone is interested, they'll get back. From there, you get on a phone call, just kind of explain who you are and what you can provide, see what they're looking for. And then from there, if there's synergy, there's a contract. We have a legal department within GSA. We send them the contracts, get everything buttoned up, and then from there, we're able to represent them legally and compliant with the school and state.
Of course, what are some of your roles for Grady Sports Agent?
Yeah, so my primary role is as an NIL agent. I've worked with 5 of my own clients. I also help with our other client roster as well. We have over 20 NIL clients. On the pro side, I help with the pre-draft process mostly. So when guys go to the draft, we had 3 guys in the draft process last season. So from January to April, my primary role is helping them with their interviews. So whenever a team calls and asks them for a Zoom interview or to fly them to their facility and talk to them, or maybe sit down with them formally at the combine, I help them prepare for what the questions they will be asked, the film that they need to watch, all of that stuff, so they can go in confident, prepared, crush those interviews. Another role that I hold is an operations assistant. So if any player has a camp or anything, we're planning to actually 6 camps this summer in total. So help out with that as far as planning the camp, getting any sponsors, getting the food for the event, stuff like that.
Of course, when working with them for the pre-draft, what is that process like working with them in the pre-draft process and getting them prepared to answer those questions that GMs will ask them?
So the biggest thing is there's going to be generic questions that every team's going to ask, as far as like, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Where are you training pre-draft? Are you healthy right now? Stuff that every player is going to be asked. So you make sure that they have the proper answers. We basically give them a script on what they can say, so they're confident, they have a good dialogue, and say what they're supposed to say. From there, it's very dependent on the player. So if a player has, let's say, an injury, like they tore their ACL 3 years ago, let's say, we're going to help them because that will be brought up in the event of an interview. If a player has a character concern, we're going to address that. We're going to make, because it will come up again. So just making sure that everything is laid out for them. They're prepared for any way this could go. And then as far as the film as well, we give them information on every team's scheme. So if it's a running back, we're going to show them what their offense likes to do, what their running back coach likes to do, what kind of running backs they like to carry. So then when they put the player on the board and show them some film, they know what they're going to be answering and not just be like, oh, I don't know what's going on.
Of course, with NIL, what do you offer for those people looking to go in the NIL route?
Yeah, as far as players we recruit.
Mhm.
Okay, so most of it is marketing. So we do outreach on a local and national level. So these could be brands as small as like a local restaurant or as large as a Body Armor, Dunkin', Fashion Nova, all of those things. So we align them with companies that they're already interested in and industries that they already enjoy. And then also collectives are a big part of NIL as well. Schools and donors and boosters are paying these athletes a lot of money to either come to their school as a high school recruit, as a transfer, or to just stay in the program as well. So we help negotiate those deals and make sure that they're properly compensated.
Who are some of the big NIL collegiate athletes that you represent?
Yeah, so we have good amount in the SEC right now. Terrion Arnold, he's a corner at Alabama, All-American. We have 6 clients in total at the University of Florida. We have Ricky Pearsall, Justice Boone, Desmond Watson. Des is like quite literally the biggest player in college football. From there, we have a lot of other NFL clients that we're recruiting for next draft class that we're helping. So a lot of top 100 talent coming out in the 2024 draft that we're helping with NIL as well.
Of course, do you only represent collegiate football players, or do you also do men's basketball, women's basketball, and women's sports?
Our focus is definitely on football just because we're a NFL agency through and through. But we do expand to other sports when the opportunities arise. We worked with gymnastics, cheerleading. We worked with softball for the women's side. We worked with men's basketball before. Haven't gotten to baseball. We have had a soccer client and lacrosse client as well. So all over the place, but it's different every single sport. You just got to kind of make sure it's the right fit.
Of course, what is that like getting to work with those gymnastics, women's soccer, lacrosse athletes versus working with your collegiate football players that will go maybe one day into the NFL?
Yeah, so the women's side, it's much more on a marketing basis. For the men's sports, especially football, there's an end game in mind of hopefully we sign them for the NFL and there's going to be a higher ROI with their contract because women's sports is much different. They are more of like a profitable in the college athletes for marketing. So if they have a lot of followers, it's going to be more appealing to work with them. Working with women athletes, they are definitely more responsive than male athletes. Like if they need to do a deal, they're going to respond and be communicative about it. They generally make better content than male athletes. So it's a much better experience, I would say, if anyone wants to get into NIL. If you want a smooth experience, definitely target female athletes because they're easier to work with, I would say.
Of course, what are some of the tools that you offer for these collegiate athletes when working with them in NIL?
Yeah, so it just kind of depends what they're looking for. If someone wants to improve their Instagram or TikTok, we're going to help them with that. If they want to be philanthropic and raise money for a foundation, we're going to help with that. If they, need connections and they want to get into, let's say, real estate one day after they're done playing football, we have connections in that. We educate them on their taxes and financial literacy to make sure that they're well prepared for when that time comes, that they're in a good position. They don't go broke like most athletes out there do. So it just kind of depends on what the athlete's looking for, and however far they want to go, we have the resources to take them there.
How is it like obviously getting to work with those NIL athletes and getting to able to market them to a bigger audience?
Yeah, it's definitely very interesting because it's hard for the athlete to do it themselves. Obviously, they have a lot of notoriety themselves as far as their name when they play college football or whatever, their social media following, but being able to be the resource for them to get into contact with a brand like a Snickers, a Frito-Lay, a YouTube that we've all done work with before, it opens up a lot of opportunities for them to not only get paid, but to improve their brand and put their name out there with different types of companies.
Of course, what has that experience been like? Obviously, seeing those athletes now become YouTubers and getting to market themselves and getting brand deals.
Yeah, it's really cool. I think it gives athletes more of an opportunity to show their personality, because before, a couple of years ago, when you couldn't get paid, like a good example is destroying, great YouTuber right now, great content, he's making a lot of money. There was a time when he played college football, and the school said to her, the NCAA said to him, you can either continue to play college football and get rid of your YouTube, or you can continue YouTube and not play college football. And he chose the latter. And at that point, it didn't make sense for him to continue YouTube and football at the same time, because he couldn't get paid on YouTube. So there's no incentive for him to do that if he wanted to continue to play. So now someone has a great personality, they have maybe a podcast, a YouTube channel, vlogs, whatever. They can now get paid doing this, which is going to help their brand all while they're playing the sport that they love. So I love that aspect of it.
Of course, how has it been like obviously seeing athletes like Destroying and the Cavion twins open those doors for other athletes that may not be as popular as what they were?
Yeah, I mean, it just shows the power of social media. I mean, if you have a brand and an audience behind you, you're going to have so many more opportunities. You're going to get paid a lot more by national brands as well. I mean, you see NIL student athletes getting paid hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars if they have the proper followers. So it puts a lot of emphasis on someone that's in high school, maybe right now, to learn how to build their brand, work on building that Instagram, building that TikTok. So one day it's going to pay off.
Of course, while working with these collegiate athletes in NIL, what has that experience been like working with, let's say, your defensive ends versus your quarterbacks who might have more of a bigger following?
Yeah, there's definitely a positional value that plays a role. It's much easier to get we call them touchdown makers. So these are your quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, maybe tight ends as well, because they're going to be the ones on ESPN if they're playing well. They're going to be the ones that people know because they're in the box score. It's harder to market an offensive lineman because not everyone knows what makes an offensive lineman good. Not many people are watching them. So it definitely does make more sense to represent more players that are heavily involved, like the skill position players. It's harder to get deals for someone on the line or a linebacker. It's still possible, but it's definitely more difficult.
Of course, with NIL, how have you been able to see the women's sports like women's soccer, softball, volleyball, and women's basketball improve more and get at that exposure that they didn't have before?
Yeah, I think it definitely just shows more of the personality behind the athletes. People are able to follow them, not just because of their athletic ability, but because of what they're doing off the field as well. Whether they are improving their Instagram, starting a YouTube channel, whatever. The more exposure that they get, the more that they will be seen on game day. So one example is I worked in lacrosse. Women's lacrosse really wasn't a big sport at all. We made it to the NCAA championship a couple of years ago, or not the championship, the tournament, and that was all broadcasted on ESPNU. It's a channel that most people don't even tune into. This past year, it was on the regular ESPN channel. So it already moved up, and it was because there was a women's athlete, Charlotte North, who played at Boston College for 4 years, 3 or 4 years after transferring from Duke. And she really changed the game. She had a ton of followers. She was probably the best women's lacrosse player that has ever played the game. And she changed the game. She made a lot of money through NIL, but she also brought a lot of more fans and exposure to the audience or to the sport that was never there before.
Of course, what is that like having people like Charlotte North bring that exposure to like a sport like lacrosse?
It's cool. I mean, it builds a new community. There's people that are going to be fans for life now because of her. Like she's done with college sports now. She played 5 years and exhausted her eligibility, but now there's going to be younger girls or maybe even family members that remember that moment. They're going to be watching college lacrosse for their whole life now. So it definitely changes the game. Like I said, with the broadcast channel, they already moved up to the regular ESPN channel. So now there's more money going to the sport. There's more sponsorship opportunities. So it really just is a win-win for everyone.
Of course, what has that experience been like seeing those collegiate athletes being able to market themselves and come out with merchandise?
Yeah, I mean, merchandise is interesting. I think a lot of people try it, but not everyone is successful because a lot of people don't have the brand or the following to make it profitable. I love merchandise if it makes sense for the player. If they have a big audience, they have a lot of exposure in the local environment that people want to buy their t-shirts or hoodies, whatever it is. Jerseys is a big thing. If the school allows them to license their jerseys through the pro shop, they can now sell their jerseys with their name on the back, which is a huge game changer for a lot of these athletes because if they're a well-known player, people will buy them now and forever, and they'll always be linked to that school. So it's pretty cool. I mean, I see a lot of unique merchandise designs that people put out that it's pretty attractive to wear. Even if you don't really support the player, it's cool to wear so a cool t-shirt like that.
Of course, talking about the jerseys and stuff, what has that been like? Obviously, seeing collegiate schools being able to sell college athletes' jerseys now and having their names on the back of them.
Yeah, I love it because when previously when you buy college football jerseys, it had no name because you couldn't do that, and you just had to pick a number, but nobody really knew what player you're referring to unless it was like a Oregon number 8 jersey, like, okay, it's probably Marcus Mariota, or a Tim Tebow jersey of Florida 15. So, but there's no name. Now you can kind of just solidify that. I mean, people do it all the time in pro sports. People will buy the Patrick Mahomes, the Jalen Hurts, because they want to support that individual player. Now you can do that in college. And the best part about this is I know the transfer portal kind of opens up more opportunities, but for the most part, these kids stay at the same school all throughout their college career. So now you can buy a jersey that will never go old because they're always linked to that school. Whereas pro sports, some players might play for 6, 7 teams, and your jersey might be worthless if they change their team.
Of course, with NIL and stuff, how have you been able to see working with those collegiate football players and having those deals to go on ESPN game day and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely really cool just to see them get more exposure. It changed the game as far as what athletes can do and the attention that goes on them. So we've had athletes get deals that are broadcast on social media. We've had athletes in commercials. We've had athletes in local meetups. So it really just shows the power of college athletes and how people want to support them.
Of course, with NIL and stuff, how have you been able to see, for example, the EA NCAA football game coming back and now offering it to those collegiate athletes?
Yeah, so it was a legal battle for a while just because of the name and everything. But with NIL, this is now legal and allows people to get some money in their pocket because of it. So I love it. I mean, people love the college football game, NCAA football. They love playing at the old ones, especially. So it's going to bring back a lot of people that used to play that. Now they're going to all buy it again. So it's a great business opportunity for EA, but also gives money back to the athletes because you can now play with any team across the country.
Of course, using in NIA and stuff, how have you been able to see athletes now being able to have private meet and greets and then getting to meet those fans like
Mm-hmm.
Emily Cole from Duke?
Yeah, this is definitely a cool opportunity because a lot of NIL deals are just on social media. But now with meet and greets or autograph signings, you're able to see the athlete in person. This creates fans for life. If or one of my clients had an autograph signing before, and it just shows the power of seeing that athlete in person and getting their autograph. Having that 5-second interaction means a lot to a kid or a fan for life. So it's definitely a unique experience that not only gets the athlete paid, but also creates a stronger fan base too.
Of course, working with those collegiate athletes and doing those private meet and greets, how have you been able to see that versus, of course, publicly doing it with the whole team?
Mm. I think getting the whole team involved, or maybe just a core group of the team, is going to give you more audience, more opportunity for people to show up. If it's just one player, they got to be the best player, honestly, or a very likable player for there to be an audience that shows up. So I like the idea of having a group. It gives people more bang for their buck and they see more athletes. But obviously, if it's like a Caleb Williams, the best college quarterback right now, people are going to show up for him and they're going to see him, even if it's just him.
Of course, with NIL, how have you been able to see those doors open for those athletes like Emily Cole, who just wrote her own book?
Yeah, it's definitely something very unique, something new. People are taking advantage of new opportunities. I mean, you're seeing people start. I mean, TikTok really wasn't a thing a few years ago. Now, all the athletes have TikToks. People have YouTubes. They'll have podcasts. They'll maybe get into business opportunities with someone jointly just to experience that. So it's definitely wide open. You can kind of capitalize on as much opportunity as you want.
What are some of the things that you learn now that you didn't know before becoming an NIL agent?
Good question. I would say, hmm, it's definitely more difficult to get a deal than a lot of people make it out to be. I mean, you see deals happen all the time, unless you're working with a high profile athlete, like some names we discussed before. But if you're just working with, the wide receiver at your local school, they're going to get deals if you put in enough work, but it's not like Nike's coming calling you and saying, hey, I want to work with XYZ player. You got to put in the work. You got to put a lot of effort in to get these deals for the players. And, that's the biggest thing that I learned.
What is something that you learn now that you didn't know before with working with these companies, working on deals for these athletes?
Yeah. Not everyone wants to support college football players just because it's a college football player. At the end of the day, companies are companies, business is business. They need an ROI on these deals. So if you want your athlete, your client to get a deal with a restaurant for $1,000, it only makes sense for that restaurant if they think that they can get an ROI of over $1,000. They're not just going to throw out $1,000 of their marketing budget just so they can get an Instagram reel in return. So it has to be profitable for them. The athlete has to have enough followers, strong enough engagement for that to make sense for the brand to make it happen.
Of course, for my listeners that are listening, what is the process like to go and become an NIL agent?
Yeah. So the biggest thing you have to do is look up your local state legislation. I mean, you could do this in every state, but I believe there's 41 or 42 out of 50 states require you to get registered with that state government as an agent. So what you could do, like I mentioned, Pennsylvania, all you have to do is search Pennsylvania athlete agent registration. This will bring you to some paperwork, a background check, a fee that you have to pay. As long as you do everything necessary, you will be compliant with the state. So that's your first step. I mean, Pennsylvania for me was about $500. California is about $30. A South Carolina, I believe, is like $1,500. So it all changes based on state to state. So you have to make sure it makes sense for you. From there, if you do become an agent, you become registered, it always helps to have a team around you. So whether you join an agency as an intern or an employee, or maybe some of your friends want to get into it together, start a little business together, get someone that's going to run the marketing, get someone that runs the communication, and go from there.
Of course, what is the difference when working with different states, like, for example, California, then Texas, and then North Carolina?
Mm-hmm. So everything's different as far as how you get registered, as far as different application processes, different fees, as well as some states allow NIL to happen in high school, some do not. Some allow you to use licensing as far as the school logo, some do not. The schools definitely have a part to play in it as well. Most schools ask you to get registered with them in compliance. So this is not going to require a fee, but you will have to reach out to the compliance department of that school and say, hey, I'm an NIL agent. I just signed this client. Here's the contract. And, you go through it that way.
What advice would you give those people that are looking to become NIL agents?
Connections is a big thing. I know this is kind of redundant in the sports industry. When I was a student, I got tired of people telling me how important connections were and how important networking is, because everybody says it, but it is super important. You need connections to find athletes to recruit. You need connections to reach out to local brands or national businesses to get the deals for your clients. You need connections to help you elevate as a person and learn more about NIL to become a better agent. So reach out to people in the business, reach out to coaches, trainers that'll help you get to where you are and get connected to the people you want to know. And maybe if you are living in a college town, you want to work with those athletes, start door knocking, start going to local businesses and say, hey, I'm going to work with these athletes. Would you be interested in sponsoring them in a marketing deal?
Of course, what advice would you give those NIL agents looking to get their first collegiate athlete?
The biggest thing is work on your offer. What can you provide the athlete that most other agents cannot? What can you say to them over the phone that gives them trust in you to sign the contract and work with you? It's minimal risk. It's not like anybody's paying out of pocket to work together, but at the same time, you want it to be an enjoyable experience for them. So whenever you get on a phone call with these prospective clients, show them what you can offer, show them how you're different, and the right ones will come to you and want to work with you.
Of course, what advice would you give those future collegiate athletes looking to find their NIL agent?
Yeah, definitely ask them what they do for you post career. Like, what's the end game goal for them? So we work with a lot of football players. If we want to work with a client for NIL, most likely we want to work with them for the NFL as well. So in that conversation, you should be asking, what is your process for the NFL? What if I want to work in sports broadcasting one day? How can you help me take that next step? What are the resources you have for me? Because if they can't help you with any of that, then this is a very short-term play for you. If you're more of a long-term big game thinker, I would be asking what they can do for you long-term, not just a short-term marketing deal that gives you $100 in your pocket.
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media?
For sure. So LinkedIn is my professional space. I post a lot about our agency there. It's just Matt Lupi on LinkedIn. Instagram, Matt_Lupi. I post some stuff there as well.
Thank you again, Matt Lupi, for your interview, and best of luck in your future as an NIL agent.
Thank you so much.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Matt Lupi, for your interview, and best of luck in your future.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.